Okay, so good day to everyone. So my dear students, I shall be discussing to you developing speaking skills. Now, when we are talking of speaking skills, we are actually engaged in many endeavors such as conversation, formal and informal meetings, interviews, and public speaking. Now, we're going to discuss them one by one. Speaking skills is one of the most difficult skill to develop. It takes confidence. It takes preparation. Sometimes, even if you just want to express your opinion, it is very difficult to speak. One popular figure says that one of the bravest person is one who knows how to express his or her opinion without fear. But sometimes we are not bordered by our fears. It's just that we do not have our confidence in speaking. So let us now discuss conversation. It says here, conversation is one of the most familiar and direct methods for communicating. In order for an individual to be as effective as possible, it is essential for him or her to know how to conduct himself or herself in a conversation. So, it says here that it's the most direct method and it's the most familiar because in your daily communication with your family, that is considered a conversation. Now, what is another definition of conversation? Conversation is an interactive communication of at least two people talking together. So when you are talking with your brother or sister, talking about what should you eat, who should wash the dishes, then that is considered a conversation. However, not all involvement of two individuals is considered conversation. Just like a ritualized exchange of mutual greetings like hello or hi is not considered conversation. It's just a greeting because conversation is the kind of a speech that happens informally and equally for the purposes of establishing and maintaining social ties or simply for companionship. So remember, the purpose of conversation is to establish and to maintain social ties or companionship. So, there are two types of conversation here. We have transactional conversation and social conversation. When we say transactional conversation, first one, you have a realistic goal. Examples is inquiring on program offering, ordering food at a restaurant, so something like that. Now, when we say social conversation naman, it is not primarily intended to accomplish a task or there is no formal goal. So, it could occur between friends, acquaintances, or strangers and their topics revolve around personal matters. Now, there are characteristics of conversation presented by Chandler in 2017. Number one here is be fully present in the conversation. When we say be fully present in the conversation, you are active in listening. Ibig sabihin, wala kang ibang iniisip or hindi ka absent-minded. You should be physically present and at the same time mentally present. Next is realize and vocalize the things you agree on. So do not always say yes just because you're afraid you're afraid to reject or you're afraid to disagree. Say yes when you want to agree and say no when you do not want to or when you are or your feelings are being violated. Realize and vocalize the things you agree on. Hindi yung oo ka na lang ng oo at yes ka na lang ng yes. Next is seek understanding more than being right. So no one wins if both individuals are concerned about being right than they are understanding one another. Say for example, there is a misunderstanding. So it's no longer important to know whether who's right and who's wrong. The most important thing is to give a space for understanding. Next is honor the other person because this will lead you also to understanding the one speaking. Because when you seek the honor of the other person, despite their brokenness and imperfections, it allows us to not only create a more pleasant conversation, but value their lives. So imagine if you or respect the person you are talking to, you will also find a way to understand what he or she is talking about. Next, commit to communicate with kindness. So it's almost similar to number 4. It's just that this number 5 is coming from you. Be sure that when you communicate with someone, there should be kindness in your heart. So that if there is kindness in your heart, it will be reflected in the words that you're going to utter. Now, here are tips on how to have a great conversation. On starting the conversation, first one is perfect your timing. Say for example, you're going to ask allowance from your parents. So do not do it during the period na kakatapos lang nilang magalit, or do not do it during rush hours or when they're having headaches or stressors. So you perfect your timing. Next is comment on your surroundings. Say having your spur of the moment conversation is an excellent way to improve your skills as a conversationalist. So when you say comment on your surroundings, you try also to initiate conversation, even in the most natural way, like appreciating your environment, something like that. Next is remember people. Many of us encounter a very large number of people each day, whether you work for a large company or simply see a lot of people in your neighborhood or at your child's school. It can be difficult to put the right face with the right name. However, research shows that making a point to not only remember people's names but to call them by name can help increase the personal connection between you. Siyempre, mafe-feel ng kausap mo na, kilala ako nito, or this person remembers me, and that gives easiness, I should say. Next is offer a compliment. So you try to seek for reasons to say something nice about the person. You appreciate them also. Now, on being an active participant in the conversation, first is you ask good questions, because when you are talking to someone and they are the only one talking and you do not ask for anything, you just say yes, say yes. So if you just do that, then your conversation will be or will end up super boring or super insignificant. So that's why it is recommended here that you try also to ask good questions to make your conversation flow smoothly. Next is practice being an active listener. So we can see that you are an active listener if you try to react on time. Hindi yung ang tagal na niyang nasabing statement and then after 5 minutes, oh, really? So parang it's very ridiculous if that will happen. So you should let your listener or your companion know that you are actually actively listening. Be genuine. When having a conversation, try to demonstrate that your interest in the other person is sincere. So when you say, for example, maybe your neighbor has a Kobe Bryant shirt hanging outside of their house and you're curious about why, you could sincerely say, I noticed you have Kobe Bryant shirt outside your house. Are you a fan of Kobe? So this is an organic, genuine way to start a conversation because it has reasons. Next is find common ground. Hindi yung lagi ka na lang nakikikontra. Say, for example, political interest. It doesn't always mean that when you are having a conversation with someone is whenever you have opposing points or opposing ideas, opposing choices, it doesn't always mean that you try to fight with what you want to or what you wish to happen. So sometimes you also need to agree. You find a common ground wherein you can meet at one point. Next is stay current on the news or pop culture. So try to be aware of what's happening around you so that when someone talks to you about it, then you could also add information or you could also relate to what they are talking about. Next is monitor your body language, because body language has something to do with the meanings of what you are saying or meaning of how you respond to the person you are talking to. Say, you want to agree pero yung body language mo naman that's not the sign that they are showing. So, your response should be complemented by your body language. Next is avoid oversharing. So, there should always be a justified time. Ibig kong sabihin, it should not always be you speaking in a very long period of time and you are not allowing your companion to talk. So, there should be an equal sharing or equal division of talking and listening. So, what are the benefits from great conversation? First is it strengthens your personal relationship. Say your parents. If they don't talk inside your house for 1 month, so you cannot tell to other people that there exists a relationship. So there should always be a conversation in order to say that there is a relationship. Conversation with coworkers improves your work relationship. Yes, when you will be working, you also need to talk to your coworkers in order to establish a good relationship with them. It's not just about work. So sometimes you also need to get down and talk to them. Next is in-depth conversation make one feel happier. Diba? Sometimes when we have problems, ang hinahanap lang natin is someone who could listen to us, someone who we could talk to. So, conversation makes one feel happier. Next is smiling while conversing with someone improves your mood, because you feel that someone is listening to you, you feel that someone is being sincere. That's why it improves your mood. So that is all about conversation. Now we move on to another endeavor in speaking skill, that is being engaged in formal and informal meetings. Now, what is meeting, by the way? Meeting is the coming together of 3 or more people that have been convinced for the purpose of achieving a common goal through verbal interaction, such as sharing information or teaching agreement. So meetings are usually done face-to-face or virtually. Of course, you know this already. You experienced this when you were still in elementary, high school, or even in senior high school. There are meetings being conducted, and one of the purpose usually is to let your parents know the projects that are being implemented, your progress in your academic standing, so something like that. Now, there are components of a meeting. The first one is content. Content is the knowledge, information, experience, expertise, opinions, ideas, attitudes, and expectations that each individual brings to a meeting. So, content is simply what you're going to talk about in the meeting. Next is interaction. This is the way in which the participants work together to deal with content of a meeting. Now, how are they going to talk about? So, the process of talking about the content is called interaction, or the conversation happening between the participants and the organizer of the meeting is called interaction. Structure is how do they discuss the content and how do these participants understand the content. So we also have 2 types of meeting. We have the formal and informal meeting. So when you say formal meeting, this is the counterpart of transactional conversation. Informal meeting is social conversation. When we say formal meeting, it's pre-planned gathering of 3 or more people who have assembled for the purpose of achieving a common goal through verbal interaction. Next, it is also characterized by predetermined topics, objectives, and formal notices. So this is also held at a specific time, at a specific place, and according to an agreed agenda. Now, when we say informal meeting naman, is a meeting which is far less heavily planned and regulated than a formal business meeting. So it lacks defining features. So it could be conducted or it could be done in casual setting, casual place like restaurant, coffee shop, or many other places. Now, in planning and preparation for a meeting, first is you have to plan, organize, and control the discussion of subjects on the agenda. So there should always be a set limits of agenda, because if there are no limits, then your meeting will not also end and it could branch out to different topics wherein they are not already related. Next is maintain the group by encouraging and developing harmonious relationships. So you should always reiterate that the participants should respect the organizer. At the same time, the organizers should also listen to the opinions of the participants. Next is motivate the individuals by encouraging all to contribute, rewarding their efforts, and supporting them in any difficulty. So that's what I'm telling you kanina, that you also have to encourage the participants to actually be open and be open to express their opinions, their agreements, their disagreements, and even their grievances, of course, in a positive manner or in a respectful manner. Now, before any meeting, the chairperson should ask and resolve the following question. First is the purpose of the meeting. Is it appropriate? Or how should the meeting be planned? Who should attend the meeting? Now, what preparation is required of the meeting? Now, there are reasons here why meetings are not effective. So, meeting is unnecessary and revolves around discussion of trivial issues, thus wasting members' valuable time. Sometimes the meeting lacks clarity of purpose. Next is the chairperson dominates and closes down or disregards other contributions. So sometimes yung nagpapa-meeting ay siya lang ang nasusunod. Next is the chairperson exercises little control and allows one or two members to dominate the proceedings. So sometimes naman, one from the participants, sila na yung nag-a-act as chairperson kahit hindi naman sila. Next is the meeting is too large, thereby limiting the flow of discussion and preventing all members being able to contribute. So, see if there's a meeting and everyone else talk. So, how will the meeting end? Or it would be very impractical then. So, those are the reasons why meetings are not effective. Now, we also have another endeavor, which is interview. An interview is essentially structured communication where one participant asks questions and the other provides the answer. So it's a communication happening between interviewer and interviewee. So interviews usually take place face-to-face or in person. However, telephone interviews can also happen without visual contact. But when we are talking of interview, it is very necessary that it should be done in face-to-face mode, because you will see the sincerity of the person you are interviewing if you can see his or her facial gestures. Now, there are contexts of interviews. We have for employment. When you apply for a job, the first thing that you're going to do or you're going to face is you're going to be interviewed about your experiences, your qualifications, or something like that. Psychology. They use interview in determining whether a person is experiencing dilemma in his or her mental processes, whether he's getting depressed or not. And research, yes, sometimes in gathering data for research, interview is also being done for the information to be recorded. Next is journalism and other media. So you see those newscasters, they interview the officials, those who are experts in giving their news reports, and of course other situations. Now, we also have different types of interview styles. We have one-on-one or one-to-one interview. So, it's the traditional interview na there are only two people involved. So, example of this is when you are applying in a certain company. So, you will be talking to the HR manager only or the department head. Panel interview is conducted by group of interviewers. So, kung na-try nyo nang nag-run as officer in schools, so you will be interviewed as a group. So, that is panel interview. Telephone interview is, of course, referred to as pre-screening interview. So, they're going to interview you through a telephone call. Structured or planned interview is one of the most common interviews held all over the world. When you say structured, na-send na kaagad yung set of questions, and then they're given time frame for the answers. Next is unstructured interview. Of course, this is unplanned and questions can vary from candidate to candidate. Behavioral interview is conducted to assume about an applicant's future behavior and performance based on his or her past behavior. So they're going to reveal your past. Case interview is the interviewer puts the interviewee into a situation to solve. Say, for example, kung nasa ganitong sitwasyon ka, what will you do? So, that is a case interview. Competency interview is just all about competencies or qualifications of the participant. Situational interview is similar to case interview, only that situational interview can replace behavioral interview if the candidate is pressure. Next is stress interview. This interview style is considered as a great option earlier to detect how the candidate respond to a stressful situation. Next is we have serial interview. It consists a series of interview. When we say serial, it is composed of different or two or more series. Next is lunch interview. So, of course, you take the candidate to a lunch to test his or her social skills. Okay, now we have the interview etiquette. When we say etiquette, these are the good manners that you have to possess or that you have to apply when you are in the interview. So, first is, while appearing for telephonic interviews, make sure you have your resume in front of you so that when they ask questions about you, you are ready to answer or you can answer immediately. So, here are other etiquette. Make an eye contact with the interviewer because showing an eye contact is also showing sincerity. Take care of your pitch and tone. Be polite but firm. So, a department head is interviewing you. Now, you are answering in a very high pitch, in a very high tone. So, that's not considerable or that's not acceptable. Next is avoid cracking jokes with the interviewer because when we say interview, it's always for a purpose and it should always be done in formal way unless the interviewer asks you to do it in an informal manner. The last one, we have public speaking. What is this public speaking? Public speaking is the process or act of performing speech to a live audience. Public speaking is commonly understood as formal, face-to-face speaking of a single person to a group of listeners. Just like you're having a speech, kung nagvaledictorian ka, and then you try to deliver a speech in front of um, many people, that is considered public speaking. Now, there are elements of public speaking. We have the speaker. The speaker is, of course, the most pivotal elements of public speaking because the speaker is the source of the message. Next is we also have the message. It refers to everything that the speaker say, both verbally and bodily. This message also has three elements. We have the content. It's the topic or subject of the speaker. The style is how does the speaker deliver the speech or the message. Structure is how does the speaker organize his or her topic. Next, we also have the audience. Audience are the listeners. It is recommended here that the speaker should have a background check to what are the age, sex, marital status, race, geographic location of his or her audience, so that when he or she will speak, he could connect to them. The channel is when the speaker communicates with his audience, they use many communication channels, just like what is the language being used, do they use visuals or something like that. Feedback is the process through which the speaker receives a response or information from the audience that has heard the message. Say, for example, you ask a question, you ask for clarification as member of the audience. So those are feedback. We have also the noise. There are two types of noise that the speaker should know. It's the external noise and the internal noise. External noise are the sounds of laughter that we hear, poor acoustics, or something like that. Internal noise occurs when the speaker is confused or conveys an unclear message about what he wants to express. So, the confusion inside the speaker is considered the internal noise. And lastly, the place or situation, or simply the environment. Now, there are different types of speeches. First one is demonstrative speech. When we say demonstrative speech, this is a type of speech that focuses on educating the audience on a specific subject. Say, for example, you give a speech on how to write a letter, how to start a blog, how to make money on the internet. So, yung mga how na yan. Next is entertaining speech. Of course, the purpose of this speech is to give fun, to give entertainment. And they are usually very short. Informative, of course, is to provide the audience with specific information. Just like when there are seminars, yung mga doctors na nagsasalita, who are talking about health, how they should take care of their health, then that's an informative speech. Persuasive speech is intended for the participants to be convinced. When we say oratorical naman, these are done in special ceremonies. Next is motivational speech, of course, for encouraging business persons, encouraging leaders. So those are motivational speech. Forensic speech is speakers perfect their skills while being supervised by experienced speakers. So forensics is just like training speech. Debate speech is, of course, used in argument. Next is special occasion speech. So these are done in special events. Now, how do we become better at public speaking? First is write an effective speech. So when we say effective speech, something that is very meaningful, something that is well organized. Next is overcome the fear of speaking. So sometimes we have glossophobia. When we say glossophobia, this is the stage fright, that we know what to say, but when we are on the stage, we tend to feel unconfident with ourselves. Next is practice the speech. So even if you're not afraid of public speaking, you also need to practice, because this will help you boost your confidence, or this will help you deliver an effective speech. And then give the speech. When you say give the speech, be confident about your speech. What are the characteristics of a good or an effective public speaker? Number one is he or she should have confidence. Next, passion. And of course, be yourself. There should also be good modulation. It doesn't always mean that when you deliver a speech, puro malakas yung boses. So sometimes there should also be rhythm, harmony, and melody, just like in music. Keep it short and sweet, because the longer the speech, the more boring it is. Next is connect with your audience. Do not be too intelligent to reach, and of course, do not underestimate also your listeners. Paint a picture through storytelling, so allow your listeners to imagine. Next is repetition. So you remind, or you try to reiterate your main points or the highlights of your message. And of course, don't just practice. Practice. Because practice will help you feel more confident, appear more authentic, and of course, it could create opportunity to connect with your audience. So that is all about the developing speaking skills. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless everyone.